Welcome back, my magnificent meeple movers. You have made a wonderful choice for how to start your week. You are listening to Game Fight Show, by Rattlebox Games. Oh, we are deep into the March Mayhem tournament. Round 3 has begun.
It's round 3.
Batten down the hatches, bring the horses back in the barn, nail the windows closed. Oh boy, we have the hot heat coming at you here. Heat so hot that Brendan and I will once again not be facing it alone. No. We have brought in some expert help to help you review these games so that you can make the best choice for who should take their game all the way into round 4. Brendan, who do we have working with us today?
Rob, I am extremely excited to introduce your friend and mine, co-host of the Forgot My Dice podcast, Mr. Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan, how are you doing tonight?
Hello. I'm doing good.
Woo-hoo.
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Oh, we're better now that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh boy, I'm doing well, but let me tell you, this bracket has just been so exciting. I've had to start taking medication.
That's fair.
I've been playing some Chutes and Ladders, and that's really dropped my pulse rate and brain activity. It's good.
Yeah, I like to get the occasional round of Monopoly in to remind myself of just how much pain a human being can endure.
The problem with that, I tried Monopoly too, but my cardiologist said that it just raised my blood pressure too much playing that one. Anywho, we could talk about those games, or and try this one on for size. We could talk about the Crew coming up against Everdell.
Dun, dun, dun.
Space versus adorableness. I mean, that's like the constant challenge within my soul, right?
No doubt. These games, these are both rock solid games. The conversation around these is going to be so interesting, I think. It's really, on the face of it, these seem like such different games. But I think once we scratch the surface, I think we might actually make it harder for people to decide. Harder.
I'm going to spend a second here illustrating that face. For any of our listeners who haven't been tracking the bracket, as the Crew and Everdell have slaughtered their opponents climbing up to round 3. You know, the Crew, it's cooperative. It's a trick-taking game. It's lots of cards. It's space-themed. Everdell, it's none of those. Well, I guess lots of cards. Lots of cards apply. Nothing else, right? Everdell, it's worker placement, economic management, tableau building.
And fuzzy woodland creatures. You can't forget that.
And fuzzy woodland. You've got it, Jonathan. You hit it on the nose. So
don't hit the woodland creatures on the nose.
Yeah, I think that might be illegal in most states.
What is this, Redwall?
Well, you have to do it in season. That's
fair. Then it's dinner.
I would tell you I'm sorry, Brendan, for interrupting you, but I'm just not. But anyway, carry on.
You know, the theme of this bracket all along has been opposites going up against each other, and I think round 3 starts off the same way. How are we supposed to compare these games?
I think it's important to look back at what they knocked out too, because it's no mean feat that Everdell punched out Twilight Imperium 4th edition, which, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that is one of my faves, and it's sitting menacingly above me, threatening to fall off of my shelf and crush me to death because it's that much game.
So far, Everdell is completely perfect in its matches against Twilight games, because it also took out Twilight's Struggle, which it's hard to remember maybe for some people, and if you're new to the hobby, you won't possibly know this, but back before Gloomhaven settled into its roost atop the ratings here.
And before Pandemic Legacy, which was there for a while too.
Sure, but I think really Twilight Struggle had a good long tenure. Longer, I think, than Pandemic Season 1.
Yeah, for sure.
Really, Everdell could appear to be punching above its weight class, but maybe just people have been underestimating.
I mean,
it's a bit of a sleeping giant.
There's a badger in it, and if you know anything about badgers, you'll know that they're more than willing to punch above their weight class.
Yeah, I think if you have a badger on your space station, it's going to tear holes in your suit.
Yeah, that's not going to go well for you.
And Everdell is coming into this having, like as you said, Rob, beaten 2 games with Twilight in their name, but also it beat one of the best space games out there. And now, so the crew's coming along, also set in space. Maybe Everdell's got a taste for blood. Floating blood.
Before Everdell gets too comfortable, it should look at some of the heavy hitters that the crew has taken down to get to where it is. It took out in its first bout Betrayal at House on the Hill. I mean...
But see, I kind of understand that, right? Because there's a game that is fantastic, but inherently deeply flawed in some ways.
Sure. You know what? Deeply flawed in some ways is not something you can hang around the neck of the crew. You can't say that about the crew, but they're both games that probably you could use to draw someone into the hobby, the crew and Betrayal at House on the Hill.
But Jonathan, you can't say that. You can't say that about the other game that the crew took out, Brass Birmingham. No flaws there.
Critical darling,
Indeed.
Brass Birmingham, I might add. Like, I'm shocked to see that. Actually, I'm as equally shocked between seeing that and Twilight Imperium 4th get knocked out by these games, especially when you look at the ratings for each. You know, both Brass Birmingham and Twilight Imperium 4th came in with an 8.7 each, and they're getting knocked out by low 8 games, which is, scrappy games, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show that these are always tighter than you think. The moment you let yourself get comfortable, the moment you let your guard down, boom, there comes a spaceship. Pow, back of the head, Brass Birmingham, out of there.
I'd say the trend we're seeing here is complexity is not always equal to strength.
No, that is true. But just remember back to the results from the last episode when we heard that Wingspan took out just one.
Mm-hmm. So the tournament's not always going easy, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of room between the weights of those two games. But I really think that could have gone either way.
That does bring an interesting point. Everdell, aside from having badgers and squirrels like we've talked about, there's also some birds in there. Yeah, Everdell's, it's really hitting on that, the fact that people love cute furry animals.
The attentive listener will recall that we postulated, and Jonathan, I would love it if you could weigh in on this.
Absolutely.
We postulated that it's possible. It's not definite, but it's possible that Everdell actually takes place within the Twilight Imperium universe. That this is just another culture.
I think that's fair, because I think Twilight Imperium, if we remember what the board looks like, it's pretty high altitude. We're not looking at the nitty-gritty. I think if we were to zoom in close enough, maybe we're seeing the Everdell struggle within the Twilight Imperium.
Well, so what do space lions eat, if not sentient badgers?
I mean, I think it goes back to the old adage of, what does a 900-pound gorilla do? Whatever it wants to. I think a space lion inherently, by definition, eats whatever it wants to.
Yeah, although I'll tell you that space lion's lunch got eaten by Everdell when they kicked him right out of the bracket.
You got to be real careful because, a lot of little bones, lots to choke on. And it appears the Twilight Imperium did, in fact, choke on the Everdell meal.
Yeah.
Everdell has those squishy red berries. Probably the Twilight Imperium thought those were actual berries, tried to eat them. They got stuck in the throat, and Bob's your uncle.
Well, I do have an Uncle Bob. So... I am going to play devil's advocate. I am going to try to make it harder, as I mentioned earlier, to decide which one of these games should continue on to the fourth. I'm calling it the fourth round. Brendan, we're standing on the doormat of the semifinals.
Right. People might even call round 3 the quarterfinals if they were going to be sassy about it. Yeah.
Oh, and I know our listeners do like to be sassy. Sassy listeners we have. So, here. Complicating matters, complicating your decisions. Here we have the Crew and Everdell. Brendan, what year did those come out in?
I believe the Crew 2019, Everdell also 2019.
Yes, that is true.
I was at the Gen Con when both of them were released, and man, let me tell you, Everdell came out of nowhere. It was a huge surprise that nobody expected to conquer the way it has. But it's such a looker, right? Like, you get it on the table, you got that 3D tree. I mean, how are you not attracted to it?
Table presence for days. All right, I'm going to take you down another complication here. Brendan, what is the rating for the Crew? Why, it's 8. Tell me what the rating for Everdell is, Brendan.
8.1? What?
How many designers worked on each of these games.
I think that's where I'm sure you're going to go askew here. I mean, I know for instance, Everdell, sole designer, James A. Wilson.
Whereas the Crew...
Oh, sole designer, Thomas Singh. What?
These games were both in the top 10 for the seeding of the tournament. These games are just a stone's throw apart on the Board Game Geek ranks.
I don't know how the voters are going to decide between them.
This is going to be one of the tough ones, and you might have been having a little fun, voters. And we want you to have fun. But now you have to put on your big gamer pants. And you need to just buckle down because there's no more room for goofing around. You are deciding one of the games. Like, this game that we're going to have go through today. It's going to go to the semifinals.
So, Jonathan, when people are going to vote and they're thinking about the Crew, what do you think are the top couple things they need to keep in mind as they think about the Crew for this vote?
I think if we look at the two contenders, one of the first things that comes to mind is with the Crew, you've got a cooperative experience. And with Everdell, you've got a competitive experience. And I think that's one of the key kind of tails of the tape, if you will, in terms of difference. And I've got to be honest with you, me personally, at this stage in my gaming life, that gives the Crew a little bit of an edge for me personally, because if I have an opportunity to work with my buddies rather than beat on my buddies, that's always the direction I'm going to lean at this point.
Yeah.
Well, now when you go into the quarterfinals, you need to bring the top shelf analysis. That's why we've got Jonathan Edwards here with us. And his point couldn't be more correct. I think the Crew, if you look at the trends of this year's tournament, these co-op games are just dominating. They are dominating.
The Crew's kind of like a cumulative moment, right? Here we're at the end of all these kind of alternate communication style games, right? You know, we had the game, perhaps the worst named product of all time. And, you know, games of the like that kind of rode this wave of intense popularity. They're quick and easy to teach, but there's a surprising amount of depth. And I think people really thrive on communication, which is why these games are so popular. And I think the Crew kind of really does bring it to a razor thin point at the end, because it's taking all the good things about those other games, but giving you a little bit more of an objective to sink your teeth into.
Sure.
So here's a question about the Crew, because I've only played with people that already know trick-taking pretty well. Is the Crew a good game to play with people who don't have a lot of experience with trick-taking games? Because part of me wonders if the nuances of the different missions demand that you already have that vocabulary, and I wonder if that might get in the way.
I think that's a real valid question. I definitely think that the Crew has a slightly higher learning curve to it than something like the game. But I also think that's its greatest strength, because if you can get people past that initial hump, there's a little more to engage there with. There's a little more puzzle for your mind, if you will. Especially because the game ultimately ends up being the same thing over and over and over again. And what you get here is that same experience, but now with variation. And I think variation is the key here. And I think that's something that gives the Crew some long-term muscle, you know, the ability to hang in there in the fight a lot longer, because you're getting that variation, and you're getting something a little fresh every time you go into a new round.
I think that one of the considerations here is that, you know, when you're trying to figure out how this fits into trick-taking in the way that you're discussing, is generally when you're teaching a trick-taking game, you have to basically play open-handed, right? Because you can't coach someone in a trick-taking game at all. Otherwise, it's just ruined, right? So having it be this cooperative setting is actually are you looking at this the wrong way? Is this the best way to teach trick-taking, to teach the concept of trick-taking to someone who that's new to? Maybe it is.
You know, now that you when you say it that way, Rob, I know that I've heard at least one board game media creator describe the Crew as trick-taking boot camp. So perhaps you're onto something there.
That's a really good way to describe it, actually. Kudos to whoever said that. That's really apt.
What? We're in mid-March now? Yeah, I could probably be right by now. It's about the right time of year. I usually get about 3 rights in per year. So I'm due one.
I've got something similar. I get like 2 good ideas a year, and I hate it when I waste one of them in, January, February.
Brendan, this line of reasoning, it might not necessarily make things clearer, but I'm going to discuss it because we're on Game Fight Show.
Yeah, and this is the moment. This is the moment the listeners have been waiting for.
When you're considering these games on Game Fight Show, I think you have to take the titular game show, Game Fight Show, into account. Brendan, one of these games has a colon in the title.
Yes, that's true.
And it's the only game in the bracket remaining with a colon in its title. How important do you think this is going to be to the success or failure of this game going forward?
You know, I think everybody likes a colon. It adds digestion to the game. No, I'm mixing my metaphors.
Brendan, are you saying that games with colons are easy to digest?
That's right. Well, I was thinking it's nice because it adds some variety, right? The Crew, colon, Quest for Planet 9. I believe that I heard, and Jonathan, I know you track the game market. Maybe you can correct me also if this is wrong, but I heard that they're coming out with a sequel for the Crew that's about diving underwater. Like they're using
you know what? I did see that. We talked about that on the show a little bit.
Oh, maybe I heard it on the Genius Forgot My Dice podcast.
I saw an ad for that pop up on my personal pocket computer just today.
That's a genius bit of marketing there. And actually, probably, I hate to say it, narrows the gap between the games even more. Because one of the things we haven't talked about that Everdell has going for it is expansions out the squirrel wazoo. I mean, there are 4, I think, expansions available right now. They've got another Kickstarter for more of them coming out any day.
They've got so many expansions, it would make Beatrix Potter blush.
By the way, that is the Crew Mission Deep Sea.
Oh. Interesting.
They even have cover art and Nemo's on it.
Oh, see, yeah, they're bringing in Nemo. Like, oh, man, this makes it so much harder. But, you know, I mean, Quest for Planet 9, we talked about it before. Is Planet 9 Pluto? Or is Planet 9 something else? In which case, the Pluto stands are going to be anti-Crew, I think.
I think in our moments of quiet contemplation, have we not all visited the Planet 9 of our souls?
My state isn't quite that enlightened at this point.
Is that perhaps the Planet 9 to which they are referring?
No, it's clearly outer space, Rob. The art
9?
makes it clear it's outer space.
Yeah, I mean, there's rocket ships and astronauts and like a whole lot of air tanks.
Oh, wow. Is this... Maybe someone put some stuff in my drink. I don't know.
Well, I do know this. Brendan, I think, is on the right track with the colon. I think, you know, the colon automatically brings 1,000 times more gravitas to your game. That subtitle's always that 1-2 punch combo, you know. One hook from the Crew, and then you get that uppercut in there with the Quest for Planet 9. I mean, that's a combo. That's going to win you something.
The Crew was our number 1 seeded game, as you'll recall, Jonathan. Number 1. But Everdell was number 9. So they're both right up there. Here's something I want to talk about. And I think this is something that matters. If you look at this, I don't think you recognize that this is happening. Hey, Brendan, Jonathan, how did Everdell finance its first printing?
Oh, I believe that was a Kickstarter, was it not?
I agree.
How did the Crew first launch? Launch.
I mean...
I think I believe it was just a standard release plan from Cosmos, right? Just straight to retail. And it was probably Germany first, so I would say it was probably Essenspiel.
So I guess what I'm saying, though, is the fact that the Crew comes to us with the full might of Cosmos, a multinational company, and all that entails. Is that going to give it an advantage? Or does the advantage go to Everdell, which built a community from scratch to have that wonderful launch at the last in-person Gen Con?
That said, Rob,
we'll find out.
The Everdell Kickstarter is not without its problems. There are people who talk about Starling Games didn't do as well on the fulfillment side as some would have liked. I think there are still some simmering resentments regarding that. Not to talk out of school, but this is part of the conversation about the next round of the expansions for that game, is people talking about what it means to back a Kickstarter that didn't have their full confidence last time.
You know, what a tangled web, huh?
I did have one more thought. Sorry.
Hey, Brendan, can I just thank you for finally apologizing for having a thought?
Yes, you should.
It always hurts me when you do, but I'm going to allow it. Brendan, please share your thought with us.
Jonathan talking about the pleasure of the camaraderie that comes from the co-op game of the Crew. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about my favorite moment in Everdell, which is the moment about halfway through the second season. So Everdell is played over 3 seasons. If you haven't played it, at the beginning, you have 2 workers and just a few cards, and it feels like you're not going to be able to do anything. And the person teaching you the game says, you can only put 15 cards in your tableau. And you're like, how am I going to get 15 dang cards? And then somewhere around the middle of the second to last round, you realize that you're almost out of room in your tableau and you still have tons you want to do. And suddenly, instead of how am I going to possibly get 15 cards, you're like, how am I going to decide with my last 3 slots in my tableau what to put there? It's an incredible moment of precise game craft that results in this really satisfying moment. And I was thinking about that in the context of Jonathan's point about playing games with your friends, because when you win a hard mission, a difficult mission in the Crew, like recently I played the one that says that, the highest card in the Crew is the 9. You can't win any tricks with the 9 card. When you win that hand and you and your table mates manage to manipulate the tricks in such a way that you can all shed your 9s when it's not your lead, I think that feels even better than figuring out how to get, an extra card in your tableau. It's just...
Oh, the room erupts, right? It's like when the NASA rover landed. Everybody's standing up, high-fiving. Somehow a bottle of champagne pops out from underneath the table. And yeah, it's good times. It's good times.
I don't think we have a name for this phenomenon yet. I might nominate the name the Ink and Gold effect. I remember we were playing Ink and Gold at Gen Con pickup game in a conference room in one of the hotels.
At the JW, I believe.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice hotel.
It was.
Too.
Oh, we weren't staying there. We just found a good room to play in.
I think it might have been a full player count game. Anyway, we were having so much fun. Speaking of the room erupting, people were poking their heads in like, what are these guys playing? And it was that Ink and Gold, which I know it'll probably never make it on to the bracket because that's sort of its trajectory. But I do like that game. But I think what you're talking about there, what happened at the table when you made that mission in the Crew?
Mm-hmm. The room erupted. Jonathan nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah. The experience you have playing a game is such a huge influence on the results of these outcomes, I believe. And I just want to throw it out there though. We're talking about the near dominance of co-op games in this year's bracket. We've got 8 games left.
Oh, yep.
3 of them.
Quarterfinals, baby.
3 of them are full co-ops.
I never would have thought I'd seen the day.
It's never happened before. In all of the years we've been doing this, never once have we had a quarterfinal so chock full of co-ops. It's going to be so interesting to see how this plays out. But that will never happen. That will never happen if the good listener does not direct their gaze to Twitter and just, it's so easy. Now we only have one bout for you to decide. You just go over there and you're going to just choose the Crew, Quest for Planet 9. I'm sorry, the Crew, the Quest for Planet 9. Or you're going to choose Everdell. How you choose, I don't know. And it's not up to me. And I'm glad it isn't. I have my own burdens to bear. But I am so grateful for the time and attention that the listener spends doing this because it makes the magic happen. Speaking of making magic happen, Jonathan Edwards.
Woohoo!
We have been enjoying your output here at Rattlebox Games HQ. I think maybe...
Dude, don't say that on the air.
Maybe since you started podcasting.
Yeah, quite a while now. Started back in late 2015.
Yeah. 6 years feels just about perfect. We've always loved your output. How it is that this is the first time you've been on Game Fight Show. Well, that's... who knows? It's a busy world, right? But
it is. But I'm always here for you.
You know what? Most days, that's what gets us through. Knowing that. The bedrock knowledge that Jonathan Edwards is in your corner, gang. that'll carry you through. That's the wind in your sails.
Can I share one of the things I enjoy thinking about with regard to Jonathan Edwards? So those of you Rattlebox Games regular listeners know that I also do a podcast called Pick Up and Deliver. Jonathan has mentioned a couple times that he is listening his way through it, but much slower than I'm broadcasting it, I believe. So,
oh, God, yeah. Your output is far outpacing my ability to absorb.
So every now and again, as I'm talking about some game or mentioning something I've done, there's a part of me that thinks, in 4 years, Jonathan Edwards is going to hear me say this.
He's hidden secret messages throughout the episodes for you.
That's right.
That's true. That's true. I'm down for finding them all. Yeah, your output speed is far exceeding my ability to
the trick is,
because
don't
I've just
edit.
got too much stuff in my queue.
Let's talk about your output. Let's talk about your podcast, because I think that the good listener to Game Fight Show here is going to have heard you today, and they're going to have a deep understanding of the value that you bring with your game understanding, your wisdom, and they are going to seek you out. Where best should the listeners seek you out?
The easiest way to get a hold of us, of course, is at forgotmydice.com. That is our website. That's where everything posts first and foremost. We've also got a very active Facebook group under Forgot My Dice. And we've got an active Discord server, which actually has been where we're kind of naturally gravitating towards, because it's a little more direct communication with folks, which we really, really appreciate.
Are you saying that there's a chance that the good listener could join your community and maybe they would have you behind them?
There's far more than a chance. It's pretty much a guarantee. Come on out. We
wow.
always love getting new folks. The show is 1,000% shenanigans from stem to stern, from concentrate, if you will.
I actually have heard you make this claim before in the trades, and I questioned it. And I will tell you, I took a sample of your podcast to a lab. 1,000% pure shenanigans. I was shocked. I thought for sure you were maybe cutting it with some hijinks here and there, or maybe a little mishigas. But no, just wow. You guys...
Last time there were hijinks, there were also sheriffs involved, so we cut the hijinks out and we stuck to the shenanigans. It was a lot safer that way.
No doubt, no doubt.
As much as I love your commentary on video games and board games and role-playing games and television and film, I've really been enjoying the, I think, is it 28-part segment now in which you watch and comment on all of the James Bond movies? Yes.
No
yes.
Time to Bond? Yes. So we started a little over a year ago. It has now grown to 28 parts because we've included movies like Austin Powers. But we started at the beginning with the very, very first Bond film, Dr. No, and then we've been going through, and once an episode, we watch the movie, and then we talk about it, and we talk about how it's aged, or in the case of many of the earlier Bonds, how poorly it has aged. Yeah, we've been kind of slowly whittling our way through it, and we're in the Daniel Craig era now. I believe Skyfall is our next one in our next episode, so I just watched it yesterday, and it's really good.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Craig, he's no Dalton, but he's okay.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that, because a Dalton movie is currently Robert and I's favorite Bond movie. It was the first Timothy Dalton movie.
Which was?
So yeah, The Living Daylights is his first movie. It was a late 80s action movie, but it has aged extremely gracefully. It put to bed a lot of the previous kind of poorly received Bondisms that don't work in the 21st century. And it also focuses on being a really good movie before it focuses on being a good Bond movie. And, that's the thing that kind of takes a sequel from good to great. Like, I always look at Empire. Before Empire was a good Star Wars movie, it focused on being a good movie. And I think that's the best sequels in the business always focus on that first. And this is a really prime example of that.
That's great. I will also say that you give great recommendations for mega cheese kinds of viewings. There was a nice discussion of Zardoz recently.
Wow, what a mess that was too. I don't know how it came into our podcast, but somehow Zardoz got mentioned, and then Zardoz, like the plague that it is, slowly grew within our minds. And
it wasn't in honor of Sir Connery's death?
It might have been. That might be the seed that germinated the idea, but much like Inception, once the seed was planted, it ran away on its own, and we found ourselves watching Zardoz, and I still, to this day, I don't know. I'm reasonably sure I should have therapy for having watched it. And I'm still not 100% sure what I saw, but I know that the entire time I was perplexed and smiling at the same time, which is never a good place to be.
Can I throw out a suggestion for a sort of Bond-adjacent movie?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a Pierce Brosnan movie.
Oh, we've had a discussion on nibbles lately. That's our pet name for Pierce Brosnan, because in all of his Bond movies, whenever he kisses one of his co-stars, he seems to nibble on their lips, and it's really strange.
Well, he is a deeply strange man in a way that I find compelling. He's never nibbled on me. But the movie is The Matador, 2005 movie.
Oh, I hear good
Greg
things about
Kinnear
that, but I've not seen it.
And Pierce Brosnan. It's pretty much a two-hander. I get a kick out of that movie.
I'm reaching for the notebook. I'm holding it up. This is my official notebook of things that I need to do in my life. And I'm opening it up to my current page, which is currently filled with work notes. And I'm going to give it a special box because I like this idea.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because recently, Rob, being the scientist that he is, Rob is my partner as well. You have a Rob, I have a Rob.
We're part of the union.
Yeah, that's fair. 82nd Robs of America, right?
And pipe fitters.
My Rob went back and watched the Thomas Crown Affair, and as it turns out, apparently, nibbling on his co-stars is in fact an acting choice that he limits to only his Bond experience. He did not nibble on Renee.
She might not allow that.
She might have a little more clout in Hollywood than some of his co-stars in the Bond movies. Although,
anyway. Halle Berry.
Well, when you talk about clout, you have to have included in that conversation Eleanor, who brings us the results for these games day in, day out, year after year. Brendan, have you reached your emotional Planet 9? Are you ready to hear the big results from the end of round 2?
I'm quaking with terror to see what happens. The intensity of my curiosity can only be matched by the disdain the International Astronomical Union showed for Pluto when they demoted it to dwarf planet.
Pluto knows what it did. Eleanor, give us those results.
All right, everyone, here are the results. The Ultimate Co-op Showdown, Gloomhaven vs. Pandemic, saw the old-timer Pandemic beat out the #1 rated game on BGG, Gloomhaven. Can you say upset? The last bout of the second round saw the Lords of Waterdeep come out on top of their plucky opponent, Camel Up. What a way to see off that second round. Back to you all.
I couldn't ask for a better way to start a week than your company or those results. Wow. I mean, I was on... we've talked about Tinterhooks and we've talked about Tinterhook hygiene, but I was on Tinterhooks all weekend, and what a relief. I think that those both came down perfectly. What do you guys think?
I think it was a heck of a fight, and I do think that the better contender came out on top.
I say it a lot, but that's because I'm a profoundly uninteresting person with very few things to say. You can't argue with results.
Truth.
One result you can't argue with is when you spend some time with Jonathan Edwards, it's going to be time well spent. And boy, I want to thank you, Jonathan, for sharing this time with us and with the listeners.
Fellas, thank you so much for having me. I had an absolute blast. I can't wait to see who wins this fight. I think it's going to be really interesting. And come join the fun over at Forgot My Dice. We'd love to have everybody listening and helping us create the chaos that we call entertainment.
Huzzah!
Here. All right. Listeners, don't forget to go over and vote. We're at Gamefight Show.
Gamefight Show.
On Twitter. Come back. Give us a listen again. I'm going to thank Brendan for joining us, Jonathan for your insights, and I'm going to thank you, good listener, for starting your week with us. You made a good choice. We're going to see you all on Wednesday. Brought to you by
Rattlebox Games.